Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa. I am the founding editor-in-chief of the Minison Project, and today we are going to be doing a Let's Talk with one of our poetry contributors, Jared Beloff. What issue were you in? I don't remember. I feel like you were in a couple, right? The last one, for sure.
I was in the love one in February, and then I think I was...
The fairy tale one.
I was in the fairy tale one. I think I had one in the one before it, too. So February, March, April.
Yeah, I'm just used to saying your name all the time, so I just don't remember what issue you're
like,
in.
I'm going to submit again.
Yeah, you and a couple other people like to submit every month. I know Anisha has been one. Anisha Cowell has been one since the beginning as well. Yeah, and Elizabeth Bates as well. She's the EIC for Dwelling Lit. So today we are actually here to talk about MFAs and the benefits of MFAs and whether or not you need one, and our thoughts on that. So let's start with you. What do you think about MFAs and the importance that our literary community kind of almost enforces on it?
So I'm coming from a completely non-MFA perspective. I didn't start writing poetry till last year, and I have degrees I'm a teacher, and I have a master's degree in education and in English Lit, and so I never even thought about MFAs until I started writing in this last year, and I was the question mark I had was like, do I need one? I'm writing now. What is the benefit of one? And I keep getting mixed answers. Some people are like, oh, you don't need it unless you want to teach creative writing. Or, you get the other perspective, which is like, you need it in order to establish yourself and get networks and connections and build a writing community, and, the more career side of things, like having a mentor and knowing where to send things and having connections to those places.
Right. Yeah. I actually started an MFA. 2019. I believe I started in the fall of 2019, and I originally wanted to do it because poetry has always been a big part of my life, and I talk about that all the time, about how I've been doing poetry since I was little, and like I love poetry and reading it and all that stuff, and kind of fell out of it for a while and fell back into it in college. I took some courses for my undergrad, but my undergrad wasn't English, and it wasn't anything English related. It was acting, directing. So I ended up doing a lot of literature courses in acting, directing, because a lot of it's about like modern theater and classic theater and all that stuff, and you read those plays, and that's all part of English. Like, I'm sure you've read a ton of plays too, and I keep coming back to Shakespeare, always Shakespeare. I love it. I love him. And I took an intro to poetry course, and that's when I started falling in love with contemporary poetry. Not so much Instapoetry, although that was part of my life at the time, but contemporary poets like Billy Collins and Kristen Adonizio and people like that, I fell in love with them, and I was like, oh, absolutely. I left college and I tried to do the acting thing, and my loans were so tough to pay every month that I just ended up not being able to even follow that dream. So I ended up in this job being a receptionist for a lawyer's office. And every day I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't have anything to do with lawyers. Like, I don't want to like exceed here. Like, I want to do my best, but I don't want to rise in the ranks. Like, I don't want to be here. And I ended up talking to a friend about it one day, and he was like, well, I know you're a good writer. Like, they have a writing program back at your undergrad. And I was like, whoa, really? Like, let me check it out. And I went to check it out, and it was creative writing and publishing. And and it had it's a low residency, and half the residencies would be at the campus and the other half would be in Europe somewhere. And I was like, well, I've never been to Europe. Like, that would be really exciting. And, you know, like, to be able to go with school and all that stuff. Oh, that'd be like so much fun. Hold on one second. Forgot to put it in full screen. Yeah, so I was saying how I really wanted to go to Europe and all that stuff, and to study writing from the perspective of people not in our country was too good to pass up. And when I reached out to them, they were just like at the tail end, like the acceptance period had just ended, and she was like, well, I'll make an exception to you, but you need to get me your stuff in a week. And at that time I didn't have like a packet of work, so in a week I had to put together 25 pages of work and all this stuff, and I sent it in. Luckily I had it mostly written, but it was written, like handwritten, so I had to type everything. and I was like, oh god, this is awful. But I ended up going in, and you know, we went for our first semester, we went to Ireland, and we learned from all these like Irish poets and all this stuff, and it was wonderful, right? And I feel like I learned a lot. And I had my teacher there who taught me intro to poetry back in undergrad, and so we like had a common ground to start on. It's not like I was starting from scratch with someone new. And he was really there for me. And that first semester went really well. And then the second semester happened, and I know, yeah.
It sounds awful already.
I know.
And then the second
semester happened, yeah. And
let's lure you in with Ireland.
I know, but it wasn't terrible. I'll start it off with that. I do like the program itself was pretty. Like the lectures we had were good, and the people who came in, they were interesting, and you know, but they were all connections that our teachers already had. So they weren't reaching out to anybody new outside of their network. And that's fine, because it was my first semester in the States. And I was like, you know what? That's fine, you know, whatever. And then the third semester happened, and I took a leave of absence. And during that leave of absence, this is this past fall that just happened. During that leave of absence, on my own, with no help from the college, no help from their networking, their lecturers that came in, none of that, none of their guidance, I got a chapbook published. I published in a ton of magazines. I started my own magazine, which, hello everyone, and I got 2 short stories published in anthologies, and a poem published in another anthology, like physical copies of anthologies, with no help from the school. So it started getting me thinking, like, if I can do this on my own, what am I really getting from the master's program? It's kind of like cooking. A lot of people who go to culinary school, they say, I wish I never went to culinary school because I learned everything I needed to learn working the line. And that's exactly how I felt. And the reason I was getting the MFA in the first place wasn't because I wanted to be a published author, because I did feel at the time that fiction writers specifically, because I feel like they have an easier time with getting published and stuff, because fiction is a little more forgiving than poetry, and at least in my opinion. But I wouldn't go to college for fiction. And that's just my opinion. Like, anybody can go to college for whatever they want. I think college is great. Knowledge is never something to regret. But I feel like the lost my train of thought. The main thing about college for me was always about honing my poetry craft, because poetry is so important. And and just the idea that I can go out and get my poems published and get a chapbook published and, you know, do all this stuff. I was like, am I really learning from them? Because, and so I was like, okay, well, I got to finish, because unfortunately I had been looking into the workforce, and a lot of places that offer editorial jobs and publishing jobs, they don't really want you unless you have an English major or a creative writing major or something like that. And I didn't have any of that. I had an undergrad in acting and directing, and no one's going to hire me for that. And so at this point, it's all about experience. And I didn't have enough experience under my belt to be considered, okay, well, you know, she didn't go to undergrad, but she did all this stuff. It wasn't enough for them to say that. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just finish out this MFA, and, you know, I'll have a creative writing and publishing, and when I'm done with this, I can go teach it in a college or whatever. And I went to the next semester, and once again, they were using people within their network. And listen, that's fine for them or whatever, but at this point, we have not seen one person of color and talking. Yeah, not one person who was under the age of like 40. And that's fine, but I'm not 40, so I need to see like what's happening for those people. And we had a Native American man, but he was like 60 something, and he was published through like a specific publisher who did that, like who does Native American stories. And then we had a Hispanic poet, but he was also older, like an older gentleman. Life now in publishing is not like that at all. It's not like it was when they were starting out, because the publishing world changes so quickly, and we've seen it. And I'm sorry to harp on Instapoetry. I feel like I've been talking about that all month, but like we've seen it evolve from when Rupi published her book, and who's the other girl? Oh no! I wrote an essay on her and I don't remember her name. Oh my gosh! I'm sure it'll come to me in like 15 minutes. Don't worry. But those people who self-published their Instapoetry in a book, and personally, I'm not a big fan of that. At one point, it had its place in my life, but now it's like I've used it the way it's supposed to be used, in my opinion, as a stepping stone into more intense poetry, I guess, a more in-depth way of doing poetry, and like the way that it's changed the publishing world. And now publishers are like, well, we want something that's going to be easily palatable for a mass amount of people. And it's like, but what happens to traditional poetry, and so it's changing, right? It's changing. And you ask these people those questions and they don't know. And so what am I paying for? So I made the decision to leave the program, but I still needed the degree. So I needed to find a better program. And the reason I need the degree isn't because I don't think I can make it as a writer. It's because I will not be able to get a job in this career without having some kind of degree, related degree. So that's where I am right now. You personally, I see you in everything. Like I see people posting about your stuff all the time. Like and I don't know if that's because we're in some kind of vacuum sealed, bubble where
the Twitter bubble.
Yeah, the Twitter bubble where I'm always seeing the same 12 people all the time post. But
yeah.
But also regardless of how popular you are, outside of this bubble, you're still getting published, and that within itself is its own victory. So in reality, like, if I think it does depend on what you need to do and where you want to see yourself, like, in terms of the writing career.
Yeah, the question that always sort of comes up for me is like, yeah, I've gotten published, and partly within that bubble, like I see the same sort of cycle of people getting published in the same place as I am, and I'm like, what is the coincidence or algorithm that's occurring with our names in this bubble with these people? And then I think about, like, there's just, everything's a question mark for me. So it's like, I've been on Twitter for a long time, but mostly, like, during the election, it was like fighting political battles I didn't need to fight. And then, or just pushing the candidate I wanted in the primaries, and then, whatever. And then just reading news. And then when I started writing, it was like, oh, there's a writer Twitter. And then I just started following a ton of people. And that was how I started to build community for myself. So it like, my track was just like, I took a course at the Poets House, which didn't really do much workshopping, because that's what I wanted. I wanted something that was good, both generative, but also like giving me some sort of critique on my form. Because it was like, I'd been writing poetry since I was in college. And when I was at Rutgers, I was the editor, the anthologist there, their literary magazine. But that was like after college, through grad school, through getting a job, having kids. I'm 39 now. I didn't really write for 17 years. And so I had no real connection to anybody. I was sending stuff to friends and relatives, and they were being really nice, being like, I can really see it. It's really nice. Sort of like, I don't know what to say to this guy who's writing in this form that no one reads. Good. So, for me, it was about, how do I find and create opportunities for workshopping, for friendship and creative generation. And Twitter has served that function to a degree, right? I mean, I have a group of 4 people that I met within the first workshop I took at Poets House. I have friends that I've met in catapult classes that I took, which were fantastic. And I, for a while, I was like, should I just take an MFA's money's worth of
courses,
classes? And I have a friend that actually did that, who, she took a ton of classes for like a year. It gets expensive after a while, taking those classes. So it's like, is that worth the money? But then, what I'm doing now is, like, I have 4 or 5 people that I'm close with, have developed a relationship with, and just said, can I send you something? And usually it's an exchange where, I'll send them, they'll send me something, and then we'll send suggestions on GDoc. But the question that comes to me is like, yeah, this is great. I have this little bubble. I'm writing. I'm being productive. I'm getting feedback. I have zero. This is all faith, right? It's all like, yes, their feedback is great. They like my stuff, or their feedback is great. They seem like they know what they're doing, or they're published. But there does seem to be, again, this is me just kind of looking through Twitter and watching people publish and discuss things or start organizations. It's like, there does seem to be this layer of, or a tiered system of, these are the people that went to the prestigious MFAs, or these are the people that know so-and-so who taught at this MFA. And the so-and-so is usually like the best writer of the time. I'm thinking of 2 specific people that I'm not going to name, but like,
I know, I've been avoiding names this whole time.
Right, but it's like, there are these people that are like besties with like amazing writers, or they're they have a relationship because they're going to these programs. And I have that to a degree with the people that I've had catapult classes with. Like, I definitely still talk to my teachers there, and they are really responsive and happy to answer questions. I always feel like, oh crap, I'm not paying you, and this is not like your job, but you're really nice. Thank you for answering my emails every couple weeks. But like, if you're in a good program, the question is like, if you're in a good program that has the things that you were saying you wanted, what is that? I guess the question is, does it open a door that you just can't open by yourself, right? Like you published, I published. I don't have an MFA. I don't have the time even for a low res. Like somebody was pushing me to take the Bennington MFA because of the low res, but
it's still a commitment. It's still a commitment.
It's like I literally just can't take a week off of my teaching job. Like I'm a high school teacher,
and it's more like
right?
it's more like 10 days too. It's like, well,
right.
normally the summer one happens before school gets back in, so that one's not really the problem. The problem's really the one in January,
right?
Yeah,
right, which is right after we get back from a break,
right?
So no, you can't take 10 days after you just had 10 days off.
Literally, like, okay. But yeah, no, I totally get that. Does it open doors that you otherwise wouldn't have? That's a good question. I think it depends on the MFA, because with the one that I took or was in, no, it didn't open doors for me. And on top of that, you're talking about having somebody who in a way, like having somebody who like kind of has to respond to you. Yeah, even then, in the MFA that I was in, both of the teachers were also teaching undergrad. So they were busy too. And in a way, I'm not trying to bash the program because it's just starting out. So they're still trying to balance everything. But in a way, it just felt like, you know, that they weren't, that they were taking a little bit longer to get to me. It kind of felt like it came as a second thought, even though I know that's not what happened. It's just that they have so much work that they're given and they're severely understaffed. And that's not their fault. That's, you know, the fault of the way that the program was built. And as it goes on, it'll get better. But as of right now, that's not what I need. And I can't just deal with it like I'm paying a lot of money. And, you know, like if I'm paying all this money to take this program, I'm going to need somebody to get back to me. And I found that the bubble that I've created on Twitter and the people that I reach out to, they actually get back to me with pretty insightful stuff. And, you know, regardless of, you know, if they're published or like minorly or like published like a lot or they're teachers or have doctorates in English or whatever, it doesn't matter, because every single person's input matters, because the people who are reading your book or reading your poetry may not have doctorates. So you want to make sure that your work is like well-rounded and palatable for everybody. I mean, if that's the kind of work that you're writing, if that's the kind of story that you want to put out there. So it doesn't matter what level these people are on, like it helps you regardless. And it's tough when you have an advisor and it's just one advisor and it's just one person, period. It doesn't even, like, forget the title of advisor. It's just one person telling you their thoughts on your poetry, and you have to know when to say, I don't like that idea. I want to keep what I want to keep. But how do you learn that? You learn that through experience. So you're out here getting experience anyway, doing stuff on your own and learning how to be a better poet. And, you know, I'm a big proponent of learning through doing. And I feel like putting yourself in the poetry world, like specifically poetry, this could relate to fiction or nonfiction or whatever, but put yourself in that world and read what people are writing and see what you like and see what you don't like and see what makes you feel something, and kind of write it down in your little mental book and, you know, keep it in there. And I feel like, you know, if you're trying to be a writer, I don't think you need to go to an MFA. Sure, you could take, you know, a master class here and there, like that'll help you listening to other people's experiences. But we have an entire Twitter full of people who are just offering their advice and their story and their thoughts on writing online for free. Like, all you have to do is read it and look for them, you know? So I feel like if that's what you want to do, you don't need an MFA. You just need motivation, and you need dedication to being able to, like, I'm going to put this amount of time aside per day, and I'm going to spend this much time reading. I'm going to spend this much time writing, and I'm going to spend this much time going through Twitter and finding people who are putting their experience online. Super famous writers put their experience online. Like Maggie Smith always talks about her stuff. Jericho Brown always talks about his stuff online. Oh my gosh, just the other day, like it wasn't like 5 months ago. 5 months ago, he put this whole thread on Lucille Clifton's thoughts on metaphor. And
yeah, I read it.
Felt
it was
about
really
it,
good.
Right? Wasn't it great? It was so
really
good.
Great. And then, did you see Ocean Vuong's like
Yes.
little master class on Instagram that it created like this whole people are like, no, that's not a metaphor.
You know what that was though? It was just his train of thought. That's the problem. That's also the problem with internet, is that you can have this train of thought and you put it out there, and another writer, I don't remember who it was at the time, he responded with his thoughts on metaphor, and Ocean Vuong's was like, incomplete, but more of a this is where I am right now type deal, and not like a this is it period. Like that's never what he was like. And the other writer was more of he was an older white gentleman, and he said his thoughts, and because Ocean is younger and of Asian descent, there was like the people who took sides also said that it was like a race war, and it's not what it was,
I mean, inherently this is where I get, you kind of hinted this with your own MFA experience. It's like institutions of themselves create that. Like that guy was speaking not necessarily even as himself. He's speaking as a product of an institution that's created this sort of ossified version of white poetics, right? And the thing that I get, so the benefits that I was talking about with the community, the opening of doors, possibly, for me, it's also counterbalanced by this sort of these limitations of institution, whether they're like where the canon goes, right? I was in academia. I was in a PhD program that I eventually left after getting a master's degree, and part of it was like the toxicity of the program got to the point where I couldn't function anymore within that program, and I saw the move to being a teacher as something that I had more of a calling towards, and I don't regret it at all. And it's actually taken like I'm 14, 15 years from that experience, and I still think about it, both with there's something wrong with me for not finishing, and also with I did the right thing, but it took a lot of weird pushback to do. There's like something about the institutions that, and I wonder if this is, I see people like talking about MFAs as like, I've endured, I made it through. It's like this crucible of fire that people have to like go through rather than learn from. It's like you have this shared experience. Like people that I really revere as writers have talked about their experience in MFAs like, this was awful and it was traumatic and I still feel it as a trauma. And I don't know if it seems to be something that's endemic in like limited institutions that don't see women or don't see people of color or don't see X, Y, and Z, any type of experience, and don't account for it, whether that's formally, like, you're doing something I don't recognize formally, like the Ocean Vuong conversation, or this is the way I've always done metaphor, or this is the way publishing's always been done, which is not true, right? And so you have that sort of gatekeeping as much as door opening with any institution, and so I'm wary of that as well. And I'm just wondering, like, I mean, these are all just wonderings, because for me it's hypothetical. I'm not in a position where I can just jump into an MFA unless I really upended my life. Like, I'd have to stop working in order to do it.
Yeah, you would have to stop and do it. Yeah.
But I think these are valid concerns. And then the question I have for people thinking about this, the versus, MFA or non-MFA, it's like, we're able to, I think the pandemic also opened up all these opportunities to go to readings virtually, to go to master classes virtually, even free ones.
Internships virtually.
And right. And so there's all these interesting things that are opening up. I wonder how that's going to be accommodated once we, return to normal.
Yeah.
But it also, we're dedicated to trying to figure out the craft, trying to figure out how do we learn from as many people as we can learn from and create this bubble of community. But like, if you're, I remember being 19, 21, graduating college and thinking I knew everything about everything and not realizing I knew I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And that's probably the reason that it was like the toxicity of the institution, like, was just something I couldn't
Avoid.
convert or avoid.
Yeah.
And so, or shield myself against. But it's also like, I wonder if there are people that are great creative people that also just need the institutional structure to get them oriented towards either generating. Like, some people need that generative. Like, I definitely write more when I'm in a workshop than when I'm not. It's taken a lot of dedication.
Yeah.
So there's that, but then also like this utopic idea of the MFA as something that's like going to guide me towards something I need to know in order to be better.
Right.
I mean, the answer seems to be like, you keep reading, you keep reading, you keep reading, you keep learning.
Always.
And
Yeah.
Right. But there is the question of like, if I don't know who to read, like, if I wasn't already a teacher for 15 years teaching poetry, reading lots of poetry, would I know what to do?
That's the question, right? Oh my
right?
gosh.
Would I know what to write? Would I know how to write? These are I question myself now as, I started writing when I was 38 in earnest. And I was like, would I have been able to do that when I was 25 or 24?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I played around with the idea that maybe that I would, after college, like, I'll just put together a poetry book and I'll go get it published and, all this stuff.
But you did.
I know. Yeah. But I mean, like, after undergrad, and, I felt so strongly that my poetry was where it needed to be. And it wasn't until I immersed myself in the poetry world. Like, I had my advisor tell me, like, oh, this is too prosy, this is too like run on, this is too this is too that. And and authority tells you what to do with your baby. You're like, yeah, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. And then I started, doing stuff in the poetry world, and I did create a writing Twitter, a Twitter specifically only for writing. No politics, no art, I mean, like, sometimes art, depends on how much I love it, but no memes, no nothing, unless they pertained to writing. And I was like, this is only going to be my writing account because I don't want to ruin it. Because the algorithm, you don't want to mess up with the algorithm. I don't want to have anything else on there. And I have a separate Twitter for my personal stuff, another Twitter for the magazine, and another Twitter for my gaming stuff, which, that's dead right now, but that's fine. And it wasn't until I submersed myself in writing Twitter and reading magazines and reading people posting their stuff on there, and editors posting what they really like and what they don't like, and publishers saying, this and that and whatever. It wasn't until I did that myself on my own time that I really learned, like, okay, I understand what he means by my stuff being too prosy. I understand what he means by, all these things that he said in the past, meaning my advisor. And it not only did it help me become a better writer, but it also helped me to become a better editor as well, and a better publisher, just, by osmosis, and I didn't get that from school. I got that on my own. So as a person who is doing an MFA, I think personally, my opinion is that you don't need an MFA. Me personally, I feel as though I need the structure you were talking about earlier, that structure. I write a lot better when I have structure, but even with a low residency, there's not as much structure as you might think. Especially this one that I just did. Now, I'm going to be heading to Farley Dickinson in the fall, and who knows what kind of structure that has, because I haven't done it yet. And they have these things called modules, and I'm not sure how it goes, but we're going to find out. But it may have more structure than my last one, which may, in the long run, help me become a better writer. I just think it's all about how long you've been in the in the poetry world. How long you've been in the poetry world is really what describes what level you are. Because you could be a good writer on your own and never have read, any poetry or whatever, but you're never going to break through that ceiling without reading where you came from. So the classics, reading contemporary, what's getting published now, reading what's been published in the past that's not quite classic, but has created like waves, like Howl by Allen Ginsberg. Like, you should read that, because that was a very influential poem. And so it's like, you can only get so far without doing the work, but you don't need an MFA to know what work you have to do. And that's where I stand.
And some of the greatest writers out there right now getting published, and they didn't have MFAs, and the older ones that you're naming as classics, like, they were just writers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, so there's this idea of the commodity, like how the institution can create, like, I think you have to be a writer before you go into that institution, right? You're not going to get an MFA does not make the poet.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Right? You have to be the poet first.
You have to have a clear path on what you want to do going into it in order for it to give you its full potential. But if you don't, if you're saying I want to be a writer, let me go get an MFA, that's not how that works.
Right. I mean, there are, to get back to that opening of doors, it's like, I published, don't have a book yet. I have chapbooks out to be published, but there's this idea of I was looking at online at there was a call for instructors to teach creative writing, and it's something I'm interested in, but I also feel like I don't have an MFA. I don't have a book.
Right.
There's no way anybody's going to look at me, right? For that type of thing. So I think there's any institution that funnels into career paths or opportunities, I think that's where the MFA comes in. It starts to open up career options or doors depending on the MFA. Obviously, it's Farley Dickinson may be better than the one that you went to previously.
Yeah.
And that may be because of their outreach or because of their scope. It may not be
how long they've been around, how much money they can throw at the program. It's all dependent.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I do think, and you were talking about this earlier about the gatekeeping stuff, that I think being a writer has a certain amount of prestige to it, a certain amount of being a little pompous about yourself, and I feel like you have to be confident in your work and in yourself in order to fight to get your stuff out there. And you have to have confidence in your work, saying this is good, you need to read this, this needs to be in your magazine, and that's okay. But I feel like a lot of people fall into the trap of being gatekeepy and snooty about stuff, and saying you need to have this MFA. If you don't go to get an MFA or go to an MFA program, then you're not worth anything. And that's really dangerous to fall into because of what you just said. A lot of famous writers don't have an MFA. It's all about, honestly, as much as it sucks to say, it's all about right place, right time, and the people you know. So if you're making those connections, and you're really working hard and getting out there, you're gonna do well. You don't need You don't need to go to school to feel like you're worth something. And that took me so long to convince myself. Like, especially because I stuck with the last MFA for a semester longer than I wanted to. And I said, like, if I don't finish this MFA, like, yeah, I'm not, I'm a quitter. I'm fake. I'm, imposter syndrome and all this stuff. No.
I've been there.
Yeah, you don't need to finish it. It's fine. No. But I do need to finish it to get a job. So that's why I went
to no.
for one.
There are realities to it.
Yeah,
sure.
but it's like you, and that's another thing that people post, like, I got into an MFA, and like hundreds of people that they don't know are like, congrats, you're going places. And it's like, you can go places without, congrats on the MFA. Like, that's a big deal. Getting into a master's program is it's a life decision.
Yeah.
So congrats, but also, like, do it for the right reasons. Like, I hope you're not doing it because you felt like you had to. I hope you're doing it because you feel like it'll make your writing grow, and it'll make you grow as a person and a writer and somebody important in the industry. Like, I hope that's what you're going for, because if you're going for, self-acceptance, you're not going to find that through an MFA. I promise you that. Like, if you are not confident in why you're going, that program will tear you up. And, it's just...
Yeah, that's so much about what it is. For me, it's been like, why do you write? And, if the answer is to get published, then there's something off.
Right. Yes, I agree.
And why are you writing the way you're writing? Is it to get published? Something's off. But there is a feeling of like, once you start putting yourself out there in that way, there is a feeling of like, well, I need to be published in all these other places too. It's like there's these ladders. It reminds me a little bit about like, I got married, and then it almost immediately is like, when are you having a kid? And then it almost immediately is like, when are you having another kid?
Oh my god!
Right? And it's like there are these social constructs of like, this is the ladder that you climb, and then when are you going to the next rung?
Yeah.
And I think there's the similar ladder when we think about writing, but you don't have to climb the wall that way, right? You don't have to take that specific course. And I think like there are options, and that ladder will get you there, but so will that set of stairs that's down the street that you didn't even know.
You didn't even know the
basic
walk, stairs,
right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you figure it out. I think again it comes back to like, if you're writing, and I think there is an accessibility now. We're kind of repeating what we've been saying, but there's an accessibility at our current time frame that maybe 10, 15 years ago there wasn't, with the way that social media functions as what you make of it, right? I can build, I reached out to you through Instagram to talk about this, right? And, right. And I
posted on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook to get people to talk about this stuff. So yeah.
Right. And it's like, there are new ways to build community. The difference is that there aren't these like, here's the marriage license, here's the degree diploma, right? These sort of like documents that say I've made it, or you've done it. But you talk to anybody, like, I have a master's degree. I have no idea where the diplomas for my master's degrees are. Like I couldn't find them. They're somewhere.
Oh,
I think they're still rolled up in the tubes that were in my house. So it's like, it was also, I think of it like I obsessed about my GPA when I was undergrad.
Oh my
God. And then no one cares. No one cares. It's like, it's what you do when you get out and when you're in the doing that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, especially when it's a creative field or whatever. They don't even ask for your GPA. They just, what'd you major in? Okay, cool. No.
But even as a, I'm an English teacher in a public school, and I have been for 15 years, and and they never once looked at my GPA. Like, no one cares about. It's like, I maybe one of my master's degree in literature, like, opened one door because I'd already had teaching experience at the college level as a TA. And they're like, oh yeah, you can teach writing because you've already taught writing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's like an institution that allows you to practice, that allows you to get. But if that's where you're going,
Yeah,
if
and
you're
that's where
just
the
going
necessity comes in.
if you're going for writing, it seems the writing's going to happen. You just need to figure out how to make it happen for yourself, and whether that takes an institution or a class. Like I thought in September, I needed to take classes all the time to write, and now I took like 3 of them, and
Right.
I got to a point where I was like, I think I can do this. And it's partly because I have friends that, like, I have one friend who will read everything I write. Bless her, she's amazing. And she, she's totally like, I love doing this. And I'm like, thank God for it, because, you're my support system in this endeavor that I'm undertaking. And I think it would be a little bit harder if I didn't have that, right? And I think it's finding that and creating that. Not everybody's lucky enough to have somebody who read literally everything, but if you have somebody that a group of people that you can spread the wealth and talk to. I think I was in a talk with Jericho Brown, and he was like, you get your friends on the East Coast, and then you have a friend on the West Coast that you can be like, it's late at night and it's only 7 o'clock for them, and you're like, can you take a look at that? And he was like,
it's only 7. Yeah, I'll take a look. Oh my God, yes. I have friends all over the place. I have people in
spread the wealth.
People in England.
Yes.
Yeah. Where you're like 3 in the morning.
They're my morning. I have something in the morning. It's like, oh yeah, Louise in England. She's gonna read it.
I actually have a friend in Thailand who is. She's actually one of the contributors. She's like 13 hour difference. So like when it's late at night and I needed to reach out to her about like, stuff, I was like, hey, like, please answer.
Great.
And she was like, yeah, it's only like 12 p.m. here. It's like 1 in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. Yeah, at the risk
so
of going
it sounds
too
like
far,
we basically said like make friends in multiple time zones, and then keep reading.
That's essentially what it is. So to wrap up this talk, it's make friends in different time zones, read, write, and know what you're doing. Because if you know what you're doing, then you know where you need to go, or you know what questions you need to ask to find out where you need to go. So that's it. Just 4 steps. 4 steps if you want to be a better writer.
Easy. Solved it.
Easy.
Solved it.
That's it.
Sorry, MFA. We figured it out. Bye.
Bye. We don't need them anymore. Yeah. But so that wraps up this talk. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And speaking for us. This was a lot of fun. And I'll do a little plug. Like, if you have anything that you guys know out there in the audience that you guys would like to talk about, feel free to reach out to me on our Instagram, on our Twitter, on our Facebook. On Instagram and Facebook, we are at the Minison Project, and on Twitter, we are at Minison Project. And we would be glad to put you on our Let's Talk and talk about, industry things and stuff that, otherwise you would see in other magazines and other discussions and things like that. Like, we're just starting out, so honestly, we'll do anything. we just spent the entire poetry month talking about Instapoetry, so it's nice to shake it up a little with and this will go up on Friday, so happy Friday, everyone. So yeah, all right, I'll say goodbye. Thank you.